Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rolling Stories, where we explore the real journeys behind HR leadership and transformation. I'm Adrian Tan.
And I'm Manu Ketan. Today's conversation dives into a fascinating perspective on HR in high velocity environments, where private equity ownership meets the people function.
Absolutely. Private equity often has a much shorter investment horizon than traditional corporates, which means transformation and value creation have to happen rapidly. And Adrian Ole is someone who lived that shift twice, transitioning from consulting to in-house leadership, now as Chief People Officer at Inskip Shipping Services, a private equity-backed business.
It's a journey that blends deep consulting expertise with operating inside the commercial engine, bringing unique insights into how HR navigates compressed timelines, technology, and the human side of transformation. Whether you are a transformation leader, HR professional, or simply curious about behind-the-scenes challenges, stick around. This episode is for you.
Adrian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Adrian, you had a strong consulting background before moving into in-house leadership, not once, but twice. Can you share what motivated those shifts and how your mindset changed moving from consulting to internal CHRO role?
Thanks for the question. Simply, I love a challenge. And I think the opportunity for challenge also brings the opportunity for learning. So the more challenges you take on, the more complexity you approach, the more opportunity you have to learn from those challenges. So I think that's part of what my DNA is all about, is the opportunity to live and learn. So I think that's one of the reasons why I tend to transition between different roles, different industries, because I love the opportunity to understand those in detail and then be able to connect the dots and maybe learn something more from that. So when you think about the difference between consulting and industry in-house, in fact, it's not that significantly different. Different types of challenges, sure, but you're still doing the HR role, you're still thinking about people, you're still thinking about organizations. On the consulting side, you tend to get breadth. You spend time with different industries, you spend time with different organizations, you spend time solving different types of problems. And I think that draws a lot of focus as a consultant, because you're looking for insights, you're looking to bring value to your clients and bring those quickly. You're on the clock. They're paying for you. So you need to always be thinking about that. Whereas when you go into industry, you're thinking more about depth. You need to really understand the business. What is this business trying to achieve? What are the financial metrics that we're trying to deliver on? And therefore, what are the people requirements that the organization has? How do we organize around that? How do we attract the right type of people? How do we retain them? So it becomes much more of a complicated, longer-term conversation that you want to be having. But with that requires patience.
Oh, yes.
Because you need to think about those stakeholders. And not everybody agrees with what you want to do. Not everyone agrees that your view on how things should proceed is the way that things should proceed. So it requires a little bit more, I guess, tenacity in some ways
to be able to achieve a lot.
That.
And I believe as a consultant, it was probably easier to get buy-in. Because as the external party, it's basically paying you for your advice.
Yeah, to some extent, I think one of the reasons to bring a consultant into a company is for exactly that reason. You're a third party. You're bringing an external point of view. You're not necessarily have the same sort of, baggage, might be a nice way of putting it, within the organisation. And so people tend to be open to your views. And that comes two sides of that sword, I guess. On one side, you can become a trusted party and you may have the right to do some things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were an internal party. But by the same extent, you can easily be used as a excuse for things, or be seen as the reason why some things happen the way they do. So you need to be, as I know we have in the room other consultants, we need to be careful about how that works. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but what we want to really focus today on is the private equity aspect of things, which is really interesting because the company that you're with right now is private equity owned, and for most of us, I think the typical understanding is they invest with a 3 to 4 years horizon, which is much shorter than the decade-long timeline that you usually get in typical corporate settings. Does that compressed timeline affect how you function as a CPO?
I think the short answer is yes. But to take one step back, I think you need to understand that private equity is not all the same. So maybe your viewers aren't that familiar with private equity, so maybe just a short few sentences on that. So essentially private equity is, there'll be a firm that has funding, and where that funding comes from really depends on what type of firm they are. And they will invest in different ways in an organisation, take ownership over it for a period of time, and then drive a very specific investment hypothesis. So they will already have a view on how they're going to use their money and what they expect to come out of that money. But the rest of it is up to the executive team and the organisation to achieve. So you're right. So there's therefore, behind that investment hypothesis is a timeline, which then for the rest of the organisation and particularly the executive leadership drives focus to a much deeper extent than you would if you have a typical board and shareholders that are in for the long run. So what you typically see from a private equity-backed organisation is that some of the typical HR strategies that you might employ in an organisation maybe aren't quite the right sort of strategies or don't fit that investment hypothesis. In short, there's no time. So if you were to try and launch a cultural transformation program that you know is going to take 5 to 6 years, which they typically do, the private equity board is going to ask the question, well, what's the value in that for us? So value creation becomes the focus for all functions, but specifically for HR and the way that you use people. We're a service business, Inchcape Shipping Services. It's in the name. So core to the value proposition for us is how do we utilise the people that we have in order to deliver and improve the quality of services that we have. And that's really part of our investment hypothesis is we're going to improve the level of service, the type of services to generate more revenue and go into new markets.
First of all, this conversation is amazingly interesting. The fact that Rolling Arrays was acquired by private equity last year, and we are also a services business. So I didn't realize actually before this podcast, but I am absolutely learning. So I'm not sure basically whether we should buy lunch for Adrian or not.
You should be on the other side as well.
No, but I'm, and honestly, basically, I am forgetting what I should ask basically the next question because I want to focus on listening to you. But on that note, I wanted to ask you one question. You see, private equity has a perception of value extraction, which is okay because they want to basically buy something at X and they want to sell it at 3X, actually, right? But then, do you think from an HR perspective, a traditional board, which is not a private equity owned board, versus a private equity board, like what is it that you absolutely found different between them, actually, in your experience?
Yeah, I guess I can't speak for all private equity, so I need to be careful. But of the private equity firms that I've worked with and those that have had representatives on the board, I think it is they ask very tough questions. All boards ask tough questions, but private equity is very sharp on trying to understand what it is the value that will be created out of what you're trying to do. So often you might come into the board saying, we're proposing to do a range of different people strategies or, we are going to ask for investment to do things. And the questions you get asked sometimes are, at the level of detail which you don't expect because they really need to it's their job to understand how their investment in your business is going to be delivered on. So that's their main focus. Typical board, you may have people with a longer term view or maybe specialized in certain areas such as cybersecurity, for example, is becoming popular in boards and so on and so forth. So they may be asking questions, more broadly based questions around how does this fit into the overall health of the business in the long term, which they're all good questions. But from a private equity point of view, they have a very specific agenda they're trying to achieve.
Adrian, I know it's your turn to ask a question, but I'm curious to ask one more.
Go ahead.
So do you think, from your experience, Adrian, that private equity has no time, let's say 5 to 7 years of time period before they want to make a sale or they want to basically divest it, versus the value creation part of it, which may take few years for any strategy of HR. We call it HR is people. I mean, I personally write a newsletter called HR is not a cost center. Yeah. And I believe that it is all about people. The business is all about people. You have to look at it. Sustainability, innovation is all about people. You've got great people, you will be successful.
Yeah.
But then, do you believe that the value that you need to get through a chief people officer function has less time to get because of private equity time horizon, or you feel it actually, you know what, Manu, accelerates that because we are always thinking about value and we are not lost in the whole of, oh, we will get value one day, let's do this now.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think it's a question I discuss pretty much every day. So I do think when you bring private equity into the mix, you end up having almost a dual track. Maybe we say that. So most organizations you would see as a train on a track heading in one direction. I think when you bring in private equity, you're also almost dealing with two trains that sometimes are on the same track or running parallel, but they may diverge over time as private equity pulls away. So it's important to understand that there are some things from a HR strategy point of view that you need to do to generate value for the private equity owner today. But in the background, you need to understand that this organization is going to continue to exist beyond this private equity cycle. So does that mean it will continue to be in private equity or move on? You don't know. So the important thing is, in my mind, is that we need to keep a balance of the two. So in the short term, yes, there's value creation activities. Often with private equity comes transformation because that's what they're investing in. So you'll have new technologies going in, new processes, a lot of reorganization, and all of those different dimensions that come with transformation. So we need to navigate through that. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're developing talent, you're looking at leadership, you're looking at hopefully strengthening the culture over time. But those two things can't be separate because what you do in a private equity cycle obviously impacts what the organization thinks about itself over the longer term. So one of the dimensions of an organization I work with in the past has been through a series of private equity ownerships, buy-in, buys out. So the messaging within the organization is that everything is constantly in turmoil because it's just we're just in another cycle. So when you talk to the employees about how long they intend to stay with the organization or what they think about the organization, their view is it's just another phase. So you need to be careful of those two things. So within Inscape, that's something that I'm very mindful of is that we're definitely in this cycle. We're getting close to the end of our cycle for this private equity. But on one hand, that might be really, really important to the board and really important to the executive team. To the frontline workers who are seeing this as a long-term place to work, it doesn't matter at all. They're still doing their day job. They still expect the organisation to look after them. They want good compensation benefits. They want to have opportunity for career growth. They want to work for an organisation and a manager that they like. All the things that any other employee wants. So that's the two dimensions that I think it's important from a HR strategy point of view.
Would that also mean when it comes to talent acquisition, bring new hires into the company, would that also affect the kind of people that you bring in? Perhaps people with shorter viewpoint horizon to fit into the same timeline as
it's a good question. Good question, Adrian. So again, I think there's two sides to that answer. So I think at the executive level, when you're driving transformation within an organization, there are some leaders that are good at transformation and some leaders who are not so good at transformation. So if we are, for some reason, replacing executive team members, we might consider that as a factor. Let's get someone in, make them aware that we're in a private equity cycle. Their role is to help drive transformation, and we look for people who are comfortable and capable in that type of environment. But frankly, for middle management and even frontline, it shouldn't be a consideration. Which should be, we're hiring you for the skills that we need today and in the future, and therefore we're looking for that type of talent. I guess again where it knits together is through transformation. You're going to be changing processes and systems and moving into new markets. So the skill set of your frontline might be changing. We're facing that as well. We're moving to more digitally digitized processes and systems, and our expectation that our frontline will be able to be more savvy with technology is definitely going to be there, like most organizations. So there's a shift in skill sets, and we're also expecting that they'll over time be better, have more financial acumen, for example, be able to understand costs of services, be able to provide better customer service and engage in more. So a range of different skills that we're looking for. So quite a long-winded answer, but I think they're the components that are in my head. Yeah.
And since transformation has been mentioned so many times throughout this conversation, I'd like to touch on that next. And I believe as to what I've seen, and it might be quite limited, a lot of times when PE comes into a company, they will really be a catalyst for technology-driven transformation because that's really the fastest way for you to transform an organization. Of course, we also understand it's beyond just technology, but with all things considered, what are some of your advice or approach when it comes to such time-sensitive transformation that has to happen within that cycle?
When I think back on my career, I think one of the main themes running through it has been transformation. I think as a consultant, I mean, that's what you're hired to do. But even in my in-house roles, I've been leading change management functions and been part of organisations that have been transforming. So I think I've seen the best and the worst of transformation efforts. And I guess the two things that stick out for me when you're thinking about the success factors for change is really what happens at the top and what happens at the bottom. So at the top, it's important that we have leaders who are capable of driving change. And it's not necessarily just, when I say at the top, I don't mean just the senior leadership, I mean the leaders throughout the organisation. Are they able to have those difficult kind of conversations where they can explain why change is happening, they can put that in context of terms for their teams, they can be supportive of something that maybe they don't fully agree on, but they're happy to be supportive of it because they can see the vision and drive it forward. It takes a certain type of manager or leader to be able to support change and hold the line, so to speak. Because the worst case is you have a CEO or a executive team that's has this great vision of a new organisation and they're charging for it, and then a few layers down, all of the middle management is grumbling and saying this is a waste of time and they don't know what they're doing, and what impact does that have? That means the broad workforce is not going to be changing. They're going to be sitting there with their arms crossed, saying this one will pass as well. We just need to wait it out. And that's the last thing you want. So from a leadership point of view, you want to have everyone pushing in the same direction. And then from a bottom-up point of view, it's more about the capacity of the organisation to change. So often we expect, we'll just keep throwing on more change. Let's put some new systems in, now we'll change this process, then we'll bring in this new thing over here, and then we'll make another change over it, and let's reorganise the whole organisation at the same time, change out the leaders. Every organisation has a capacity for change. And if you bring that down to an individual level, every individual has capacity for change. And we don't necessarily know on a day-to-day basis what's happening in our employees' minds. They might have just a new child, a new baby, not getting good sleep, or maybe their parents aren't well and they're having to struggle with that. There's so much happens in our daily lives that gets translated into how ready we are for change in the workplace. So the bottom-up understanding of where is our workforce in terms of its capacity to change, how do they understand what's going on, how can we make this simple for them to engage with and have discussions about and navigate on a personal level. So stitching those two things together is very important. The technology is actually the easiest piece. I often laugh about with my technology guys is that they're very much focused on the system go live.
Okay.
So from their point, they spend a lot of time doing design and development. They're sweating blood to get this thing up and running, and then they put it live, and maybe there's a few issues, and they resolve the issues. Once that's done, the system's live. And I joke, I say, well, once that's done, now the change begins. Because now we have to get the organisation using what you developed. Now they have to use it in a way, get good with it. They have to become productive. And then, and only maybe then, will we actually generate any benefits. So it's a very different way of thinking about things.
Oh, no, that's very, very true. That the way you mentioned actually that the change begins later. And in our business actually, Adrian, we are a consulting business for HR technology. So we exactly do the HR system implementation. And I tell all my clients actually that the reality is, and in fact our own people actually, that don't just be focused on the project. Of course, the project requires attention and it is the foundation. But the reality is you have not bought a project the whole idea is it is just a means actually. You have bought a solution and that will only be used when it is live. And that's where the real focus actually should come. But sometimes when people are so much into it, then they forget about that and they say, okay, that's done. Now let me sit back and relax. And that's where everybody says, oh, we did HR tech transformation and the value did not come out because everybody is already tired by that time, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's a mindset actually that if you think about that, it's a long journey. Then you are not tired because you're figuring it out and you don't basically invest only on the tech part of it. Actually, it is the after.
Yeah.
On that note, speaking of technology, the word transformation is a common word that all of us use. We like to use it. Sometimes I reflect upon the meaning of transformation. Actually, it's like, okay, what is the meaning of transformation? But on that note, today, in the world of AI. I mean, I don't think there is any conversation without AI. I'm surprised that for so long we've been speaking, I don't think we used AI, which is great actually. But then everybody thinks that AI is the only magic to achieve transformation today. And I think partly I also believe that, but I would like to pick your expertise and your view on that do you think that in the current world where we live in, AI is going to be, is in the people function from a transformation perspective, you believe that AI is taking attention from other important areas where transformation can be easily achieved, or it can help to achieve transformation, but everybody's just talking about AI?
Yeah, that's the big question. So firstly, again, a definition, right? So AI, similar to transformation, AI has become two-letter acronym that means different things to different people. So,
that's a nice way to put it, Adrian. Yeah.
So when I went through university, we had a subject called artificial intelligence, and I won't tell you how long that was, but yeah, it was some time ago. So I think artificial intelligence has matured a lot significantly to a point now where it's on everyone's mind as to what it's going to be, but it is different. And then I think if you talk about where AI is today compared to where AI might be, in a week, a month, a year, this thing is moving very quickly. So, and then there's this discussion of general artificial intelligence, which is kind of the pinnacle that the organisations are investing so much money in at the moment. So how long is it going to take for that to pay off? So I think that's something we need to be aware of as an organisation. However, when you boil it all down and you look at your own organisation and your own self-development, then I think that's where as they say, the rubber hits the road. So I think there are a lot of good tools out there at the moment, and I specifically use that word intelligent. I specifically use that word tool specifically because they are tools, as the way I see it at the moment. I don't see them artificial intelligence, particularly when we're talking about agents, ChatGPT or Copilot. I think they're good tools at this point in stage in development. So I don't see them a lot differently to other tools that have been released, as you know, in the HR tech world. There's been some good recruitment tools. There's some good, HR talent tools.
Yep.
There's a universe of these things. In fact, I think of all the enterprise functions, HR solutions have exploded in the last 5 to 10 years in comparison to, say, procurement or where that went through a previous explosion. So I think there's as many tools as you want, they're all available to you. But when it comes down to employees and the organisation, how many of those tools can your organisation actually absorb and use in a way that will produce some sort of productivity? I think that's the question that's on every board and every CEO's mind at the moment, is if I invest in these tools, what will it actually bring? And I don't think that comes down to there's no silver bullet in that. I think that comes down to a organisational point of view as to what is the work we do today. If we introduce this tool, what part of the work will it change? How will it drive productivity? And therefore, how can we scale it? That's one approach. I think the other approach I've seen work quite well is the let's give it to them and see what happens approach, which is training everyone, telling everyone we're going to be using Copilot, for example, training everyone in Copilot, and then setting up communities of users to say, okay, well, what did you do this month? What did you learn? What did you apply it to? And where you find hotspots of stuff that looks good is then, okay, are you willing to fund it as an organisation? So one example might be you've got someone in procurement who started to use ChatGPT to develop quotes, just by putting some information in there, and that saved me, 4 hours a day doing this. That's great. How can we scale that? And most importantly, how can we make sure our data is protected? We don't have any issues with cybersecurity, so on and so forth. And the enterprise kind of takes a look at it. I think there are a couple of examples of how you can do it. But to answer your question directly, I think they're tools. I think in terms of rolling them out, the same sort of change management approaches should be used. Ask me again in 5 years' time, I might have a completely different answer.
And since you ended on change management, I think that's something that I also want to touch a bit more on. Again, bearing in mind a PE-backed company may function very differently. The approach to change management, I believe, may also differ from how one would do in a different setting. For our audience out there who may be going into a similar situation or already in a similar situation, what are the things that they should look out for when it comes to change management and how it should be applied in such a PE-backed setting?
I don't know that I would say there's any specific strategy required in a PE setting that's different to what you would do in other settings. I think the key, I guess the kernel of that is transformation. So PE firms drive transformation, therefore change management becomes important. The one layer, I guess, that PE would bring is again that focus and the flavour of transformation that you're going through. So it's going to be a lot more focused on specific value drivers. It's going to be very clear on what it's supposed to produce within a certain period of time, and the funding provided to you to deliver that transformation is also going to be very clear. So I guess in some ways it does allow you to be very specific about what you're doing from a transformation point. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yep.
Whereas some transformations in a non-PE organisation can tend to drag on for a very period of time. We're starting transformation, and in 6 years you're still talking about transformation. Whereas I think for private equity, certainly for the specific investor that you've got in place now, they'll have a specific view on budget and outcome once they move on through whatever transaction or deal they do. It's just as likely you get another private equity firm that comes in and says, okay, we're going to do another round of transformation. So change again has to come through that. So I would just summarize that by saying I think all the tools you have in your toolbox around implementing change will apply. So having a very clear vision around what you're trying to deliver from the change, having a leadership team that's aligned around that, being able to ensure that your workforce understands the change, knows what they have to do differently, and then making sure that they've got the ability to do it. So I've always talked about this idea of do they know what they're supposed to do? Do they have the ability to do it in the sense that they have the skills to do it? And then thirdly, have we removed any barriers that will prevent them from doing that? So often we complain about the front line, they're not using the system. We've trained them, we've told them what to do, and then you go down and you ask them, what's the blocker? And they point at a number of things that can easily be removed, but it's not in their power to do. So you remove those and all of a sudden
It
they're
works.
using the system.
Yeah.
So it's those three dimensions of do they know what they're supposed to do? Do they have the skills? And can they do it? Are there any blockers that remain?
That's an amazing point, actually, Adrian. And in fact, I'm reflecting upon it that every time when we roll out a system, one is that, we need to find change champions. The change champions, if are those who can easily use the system, they will feel, I can use it, why can't you use it? And then they are not change champions, actually, right? In reality, it's all about taking accountability and responsibility of whatever initiative you are taking by not blaming that, why are you not using? How can I make it easy so that you use?
Yeah.
That's not their problem, that's our problem, actually, right? Which we are rolling out. But it's a mindset, it's a change mindset, actually, but it is sometimes tough. And some people call themselves change strategists, actually. And they sometimes basically feel that, no, these people are not going to be change champions. In fact, I would rather tell my team actually that identify the people who are maximum resistance to change and make them change champions by understanding what are you wanting from the system.
Yeah.
Then it will be easily adopted, actually, right? It will take probably more time to go live, which is fine.
Yeah.
But then at least it will be used, actually. Okay, I wanted to ask you one question. I don't know how much time we have, Adrian. Adrian, you have consulting experience, you have private equity experience, and of course you are a chief people officer. So I would consider these three different areas in a way, actually, that there is a function, there is a way private equity operates, there's a way consulting operates, actually, right, which is very business centric, actually, right? It's all about billability and it's all about business. But in HR, we always say, I think it is already a accepted concept that HR needs to think about business. HR has been blamed for a very long time, actually, that, HR people don't think about business. They think about policies, processes, and administration. Business doesn't want to talk to them. That is why business says you are a cost center. And my life goal, at least my professional life goal, is to prove to the business that we are not a cost center.
Starting with the newsletter.
Starting with the newsletter. Thank you. That was a good plug-in, Adrian. So the question that I wanted to ask is, earlier I was thinking I'll ask you that, do you think being business focused is important? But I think that's a given. But what do you think actually that you feel HR can prove to the business leaders, which is either private equity board or even to the general business, actually, right? General, because you are running a big business, which is people business, that HR can add business value. So it's not about thinking. My question, just to summarize, Adrian, is not about does a people leader or a CPO or a chief human resource officer needs to be business focused. I think that's a given. That's not my question. But my question is that how do you think from your experience, because you have vast experience on the two sides, you can tell the business that, look, HR is of strategic importance. You better invest and think about it if you really want bottom line. Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So let me respond to that then. So there's this analogy of HR having a seat at the table that
Yes.
in this context, people tend to talk about that. So the way I always think about it is actually there's a seat waiting at the table, and it's up to HR
Exactly.
to pull back the seat and sit down and get involved in the conversation. So that's the way I view it. But to be able to sit and have that conversation, you need to be able to talk the same language. So in some ways, it's saying, there's a seat at the table, but they're not speaking your language. You need to learn that language before you can go and get involved in the conversation, add some value to the conversation. So what is the language of the business? And at a general level, the language of the business is revenue, margin, cash flow. Can you talk about those things? Customers, yeah. Sales velocity, pipeline, so on and so forth. So all the understanding all the different, and if you're in manufacturing, the production and operations, and depending on what industry you're in, you'll have different language. So I think number one is it's important that anyone in HR, and I say the same thing to my regional HR teams and even young interns that are coming through and saying, what should HR do, is understand the business. And the only way you can understand the business is getting in conversations, going and asking questions. And the more questions you ask, the more you're going to learn. So that's kind of the starting point. And that may mean you need to go and do a basic course on financial acumen or a business course or just spend time with someone in finance and show me the numbers and take an interest in those numbers. I think then the next question flows is, okay, then how do you actually add value? And I think that's where the people function brings a unique lens to it. So when you think about the board or the executive team, everyone in that executive team has a job. And even the CEO fits into that. They have a job. Their job is not to think about people every day. They expect you to do that. That's part of your job. That's why you're there. So not everybody else, you can't expect everyone else to have a lens on people across everything they're doing. Head of operations has a lens on whatever the operations is. Procurement has a lens on contracts and vendors. Finance has a lens on the financial numbers and so on and so forth. So the only person sitting around that table that has a lens on the people, on talent, leadership, culture, all that good stuff that HR does, is you. So bring that to the table.
Okay.
Understand the perspective of the business, what the business is trying to achieve, and then think through that the people lens as to what strategies can I put in place, what are some of the areas of weakness we have within our people skills, our people capabilities, our talent, and then start to put in place strategies to close those gaps. And it's just a matter of working through the process. Most importantly, on top of that, is to prioritize, because as a HR leader, you come in and you start talking about 10 to 15 things that we need to do. You're going to exceed the capacity of the other executives to understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it's about simplifying it down to your 2 or 3 key messages of, we have an issue, for example, with retention. We need to drive retention. The way that we're going to drive retention is through 2 or 3 things. If we're all okay with that, I'll go ahead and I'll keep you updated. And then you take responsibility and you go and do it. I think that's the way, for me, is the way that HR should approach it, the similar as any other executive around the table does.
Adrian, I just want to basically spill the beans. I have asked this question to many executive leaders, actually, especially in the HR. Probably for the last 5 years, maybe if I would count maybe about 75 or 80 leaders, actually. This is one of the best answers I've gotten. And my takeaway is that the concept that you mentioned about the seat, I think it's great. Then the other one is actually that when you're talking to the business, you talk in their language. Just talk about business. Because the people aspect is your. Don't try to find in them the soft corner for people. It's their job is the business, actually. So if you help to simplify their job and do your job to translate that, and then, for example, you mentioned retention, that it's a people problem. It could be culture, it could be performance system not doing good, it could be rating not properly done, all of that. They're not interested in that, but they're only interested in guys, the A players are leaving. I need to fix that. That A player needs that particular plant to run.
Yep.
We can't afford it. Can you? No. Can you give me support to fix that? Of course, yes. Let me come back to you in the next board meeting and I will tell you how did we fix.
Yep.
And I think that's about
what
it,
I need
right?
from you. That's about it.
Yeah.
The other way, the opposite way to look at it is from their shoes, right? So would you want the head of finance, the chief financial officer, to come over into HR and start running all the HR things that you need done and forget their job?
Yeah.
Because if they forget their job, then the organization is going to be in a pretty bad way. So if you're thinking, I'm going to spend all my time trying to convince the executive team of all the stuff that we need
People
to do
is
from
important.
HR,
Then they're like, come on.
what's the point?
It's a
your
cost
job.
center.
Yeah, they're expecting you to go and do it. So go and do it.
Absolutely.
But if you need something from the rest of the executive team, then that's their responsibility. And sometimes that's where influence and stakeholder management and all that kind of stuff comes into play, because you need to convince them that what you're proposing as a solution or as a need is as equally as important as a need from some of the other functions. And that's what the whole idea of an executive team is you're constantly looking at priorities, making decisions from a strategic point of view. Are we going to do X over Y? So as a head of HR or within your HR space, part of your challenge is to make sure that they understand the value and the importance of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think something that Manu demonstrated in his role play earlier on is storytelling. That aspect is also quite important.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Beyond just zeroing in on just the few important information, you want to storytell to evoke that emotion as well. It's not just, hey, these are the numbers, go read it.
Yes.
Questions, ask me. But you have to present to people and let them paint the picture in their head so that it will resonate the importance of the matter to them.
Yeah, it's a good point. One of the things I've learned, I guess, over the years is managers actually really like to hear stories about their people and like to hear feedback from their people. One of the most interesting things to do is when you do an employee survey, for example, and you get the verbatim feedback results and you provide some of those to managers, they're super keen to read it. Now, whether they like what they're reading is a different story. But if you say to a manager, I've got a whole bunch of feedback from your employees, would you like to read it? 9 out of 10, they're going to rip it out of your hands. They're super keen to read it.
Okay.
So through that lens, then you know that part of your opportunity as a people leader is to bring some of this information up to them. I've spent time on the front line. We've done some focus groups. Here's what your employees are saying, and what they're saying is important is X. If you can bring some of those stories and back your prioritization with evidence that that's something that the front line wants, then you'll get a very open ear to it, as opposed to you as a HR leader coming and saying, I've done some research in a dark room, I've talked to some consultants and I think we should do X. It's a much harder convincing process.
Yeah. Oh, again, amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
All right, Jen, as we wind down to the end of this episode, we still have another segment before we let you go, a rapid fire round. So first thing that comes to your mind, no overthinking. Okay, Manu?
Coffee or tea?
Coffee, hands down.
What's your go-to way to unwind after work?
So I exercise. I like to run mostly, but all different forms of exercise, either doing it or, more importantly, watching it.
Oh, okay.
Or thinking
That's
about
a good one. One HR myth you wish would disappear forever, apart from HR being a cost center.
I think the myth that HR can't give input to the organisation. I think I can get quite long-winded about this, but I think it's on both sides. It's on the business side, as we call the business, but actually HR is the business.
Yeah.
So HR needs to understand that it's equally responsible for having an impact as every other function.
If HR has a superpower, what would it be?
Listening to the workforce, understanding the workforce, I think. So a lot of other members of the senior leadership team will understand their area. I think for HR, our superpower is understanding what skills we need, understanding where the talent comes from, what the talent wants, how to retain talent, how to find purpose, drive motivation, how to think about diversity, inclusion, all of that. That whole world, that's HR.
Okay, this one is a little tricky one. Not so much qualifies for a rapid fire, Adrian, I would say. What's the best career advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've had a lot of advice over the years. I think the best advice, and very simple advice, is just about being resilient. So, and it comes in different forms. Some more suitable for ears and others not. But that's just the message I've got. Is over time, make sure that you, whatever you experience, take it, learn from it,
Just keep doing.
move on.
Just be consistent, actually.
Yeah, and move on.
If you could automate one part of your job tomorrow, what would it be?
Anything that requires me to sit at my desk for more than an hour.
Okay.
I like to be out talking with people, learning about the business, understanding what we do on a daily basis. Sitting in front of a computer, working on spreadsheets, or detaches me from that. So yeah, anything I can automate in that world, I'm all ears.
So Adrian, I'm going to pay you back for the advice that you've given, which is very precious. To answer your question about that, this is not a rapid fire question. There is another one waiting. You can think about vibe coding. You can think about what stuff you're doing every day on your desk, and think about what can automate it. There are tools available today. You talk to them, and they build application for you end to end. If you haven't experienced it, you should search vibe coding on internet, and I promise you, you'll be blown away.
Okay.
Meaning something that you feel can be done in 6 months can be done in few hours today. I personally experienced that. But yeah, coming back to the before Adrian scolds me actually for not finishing the podcast on time. If you weren't in HR, what would you be doing? I'm keen to know.
I would be sitting on the beach, waiting for the next best wave to come through, getting ready to go and run a cafe. I think I'd be happily running a cafe on a beach somewhere, enjoying meeting people and making sure that they're having a good time while they're in my cafe.
Okay,
While
then,
sharing with customers his past stories.
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
Adrian, thank you so much for your time today. I really learned a lot about a PE operated environment. To some extent, there are a lot of similarities to what other companies are doing. Of course, the timeline is one thing, but I do feel that there are a lot of things that other companies who are not PE owned actually can learn from. Because who doesn't want change to happen much quicker? Why do you need 50 years for change to happen when you can work on it in a more compressed timeline, in a sustainable fashion, of course? And I think that those are things that I hope our listeners who are out there who is in similar shoe or looking to go into a similar shoe will be able to learn from.
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. I think I've in this last 30-40 minutes, I've learned a lot from you. I did not get a chance to know you a lot before this podcast, but I think I know you now a little bit about your thoughts on HR and leadership, and I think that was amazing. One of the things that I will take back from this conversation is about when you mentioned about HR having a conversation on the board that I need a seat, rather than basically a seat is there, it's waiting, it's for you to basically make sense out of that. Actually, I think that's an amazing concept and thought. It's again taking responsibility rather than blaming that, HR, like that, actually, right? So it's amazing.
Yeah.
And for our viewers, listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do not hesitate to like, follow, subscribe to this episode so it could be amplified to more viewers and more listeners out there. And until the next episode, keep rolling forward.
Keep rolling forward, guys, and thank you very much for supporting us so far on Season 5. We are just inching towards the end of Season 5, but we will still get you a couple of more episodes before we start preparing for Season 6.